Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS value plays for this week's Wells Fargo Championship. Yesterday, we broke down the top end of the Draftkings pricing. Well, today, doing a little bit of dumpster diving, trying to uncover some diamonds in the rough, some of those value plays that you can look to for some potential top end upside that can be hit on. And 3 of our 4 picks last week. Of course, Cameron Champ was our poster child for this, right? A high upside play that certainly brought quite a bit of risk along with it, but ended up having one of the top finishes in terms of fantasy points last week. We had guys like Bill Gordon, Akshay Bhatia, of course, that were all in contention there on Sunday. So overall, I'd say from the value picks perspective, core plays, of course, had Tony Finau over there, a bunch of other top 5, top 10s. Pretty successful week when it comes to these plays, but we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're looking forward to this designated field where we've got much softer pricing than what we had for the Mexico Open, which means that we have a lot more to choose from in that 7K range. There's a lot of depth. There's plenty of guys that even have some good course history that are underpriced. So we're going to have to make sure to really pick the best spots, right? You could pretty much take anybody in that 7K range to get away with it, but these 4 players specifically are the ones that I have my eye on for the GPP contest for some potential top end upside. First up, we've got ourselves Keith Mitchell, who was one of my top plays for this event the last time it was at Quail Hollow. Almost ended up coming through for a win, and a lot of that was because of his top 8 finish the first time he ever played here at Quail Hollow. So let's just take a look at the event history. It's where I want to start with good old Keith Mitchell. Last year, missed cut was at TPC Potomac, so throw that out the window. Don't have to worry about that. Completely different golf course. One's short, one's extremely long in a Ball Strikers Fest. And of course, the weather last year at Potomac was an absolute slog fest. So let's look at this. T3, T8, and then made his first cut there, T34. So I forgot about that finish, but T8 is what got me on him there in 2019. And T3 was exactly what you were looking for at his price tag. He was in that 6K range, and now he's in a different stage of his career. He's a much better player than before, so now he's in the top end of the 7K range. So our expectations are a little bit higher for Keith Mitchell now, but with the track record, especially when he wasn't nearly as consistent as he is now, makes me like him even more. I mean, let's take a look at the last 36 round baseline because it's been excellent for good old Cashmere Keith, Killer Keith, as some people will call him out there, but gaining 0.8 strokes per round off the tee, a slight loser on approach. That is certainly the weakness of his game, but we'll get to that here in just a second. Around the green, a slight gainer, and the putter, maybe a little bit inconsistent, but more than capable of going out there and having a pop week for 4 or 5 strokes gained. That's something that he does regularly. Unfortunately, on the weeks where he doesn't have his best stuff, he'll oftentimes be trunk slamming, and usually it's because of bleeding strokes on the green. So he has a lot of inherent risk, but much like last week, right, we're looking for those high risk, high upside plays. I don't really care if somebody's finishing in a top 30 in this kind of field. With how soft the pricing is in large field GPPs, you're going to need top 5, at least top 10 finishes to get into that optimal kind of space. So Keith Mitchell, I think, has the firepower to get there, and I promise you, we get back to this approach play. Though he's, not the best player overall when it comes to the approach play, with the long irons, if you take a look at the 175 to 200 yard range or that 200 to 225 yard range, he's typically top 30 on the PGA Tour. In fact, I looked over last season, I looked over 2 seasons ago and 3 seasons ago, and he's been top 50 in both of those categories, or I should say, actually, I think the 250 plus yard range, it was 2 of the 3 years too. Either way, in most of those long iron buckets, he's been top 50 the last 3 years. Now, if you look at the wedges, tends to struggle a little bit. Even some of those mid irons, that 125 to 150, at 150 to 175 yard range, it's typically not his best bucket. I do have to say that. But around Quail Hollow, you're going to have a disproportionate amount of those long iron shots, whether it's the long par 3s, the par 4s that are in that 450 to 500 yard range, all the type of buckets where Keith Mitchell does his best work. So I think this event history is emblematic of this course fit. And given that he's just such a much better player, much more consistent player at this stage of his career, I think the price tag is warranted, and I think some of the steam behind him is warranted as well. You can see over here in the projected ownership tab, he is at 12%, which is certainly there. I mean, he's one of the higher owned players in this top end of the 7K range, but I think it's warranted and somebody that I will be getting leverage to despite some of the high ownership there. Next up, we've got Gary Woodland. He was everyone's sweetheart last week in the 9K range at the Mexico Open. And though he didn't have the best finish, right, made the cut at the very least, now he's in the 7K range and only 10% owned, which given the price decrease, given that it's another off the tee golf course, you would expect him to be getting some steam. So when I saw just 10% in my ownership projections, I had to be all over Gary Woodland into this scenario. So you take a look at the last 36 rounds, you'll see why he's getting the steam that he is, gaining 0.7 strokes per round both off the tee and on approach. The short game can be a little bit problematic from time to time, but the more that you zoom in on Gary Woodland, the better the metrics start to look, right? Gaining even more significantly with the ball striking. The short game a little bit less of a problem over the last 12 measured rounds. And if you take a look at the event history, it hasn't been perfect. He does have a top 5 finish here 2 years ago, the last time they played at Quail Hollow. Also has experience at the PGA Championship. They played here at Quail Hollow as well. So I like the fact that he's seen this course a lot more than others. He's definitely a course fit. You look at some of the other comp courses I'm using this week, he tends to find a lot of success. And I know that this Poa Trivialis, right, losing 0.17 strokes per round doesn't look all that great. But when you compare it to his baseline over the last 36 rounds, it's about half a stroke better, right? I mean, he's been bleeding strokes on the greens. And if you take a look for his career, right, he's not been the best putter, right? That he's known for his ball striking. He's definitely not known for his putting ability. Draining a lot of putts, that sort of thing, is not what he's known for. But on the surface, has at least been a little bit less horrible. Right, he's been a little bit closer to average, which is a huge improvement for him. So I like the course fit. I like the fact that people are a little bit disappointed after him being in the 9K range last week and just getting right around a 40th place finish. So I'll be all over him now that he's cheaper and at lower ownership. Just a reminder, if you want access to all of my plays, all of my ownership numbers, modeling, and whatnot, it's all posted on my Patreon page. So check that out in the description if you're looking for that. Next up, we got Kitayama, though, another ball striking specialist who I think is being disrespected in terms of the pricing. You look at some of the peers around him, he's by and far the best. I mean, he's the only one with a win of late of anybody in this range, or at least at a top end field, like the API with Kitayama. And over the last 36 rounds, he's doing exactly what we're looking for here, right? Consistent across the board. I have to say, he's much more of a distance guy off the tee than he is an accuracy guy. So that's kind of what we're looking for at Quail Hollow. So I know it's only, right around a neutral off the tee there, but he's been much better. Approach play is typically a little bit better than 0.1 strokes per round. Let's see, over the last 12 rounds, how's he been playing? And it hasn't been that good of late, right? He hasn't had a ton of top finishes. Yeah, slightly losing off the tee. I'm sure he's hit a few balls out of bounds. That's likely the culprit there, but gaining across the board. And actually, I'm looking at the wrong metrics here. Same thing though, right? Losing off the tee, gaining across the board here. I was going to say 1.6 strokes per round. That's insane for Kurt, but this 0.8 strokes per round. He's not typically one of the best putters on tour, but of late, and I think it's why he's popped so much, why he's won at the API, why he's finished in the top 25 in these elite tier events, is he's figured out the flat stick. He's always been a near elite tee to green player. And I don't want to say elite tee to green because he's not gaining 2 strokes per round tee to green all that often. I mean, when he's in a hot stretch of form, he pops like that from time to time. But consistently, he's at least near elite player, right? We'll give him like a well above average grade in that category. So I love him at $7,200. The event history is non-existent. He has not been here very often. Last year he played at Potomac, so no history at Quail Hollow. Was not on the President's Cup team or anything like that, so doesn't have any exposure from there or from the 2017 PGA Championship. So a true newcomer here. I would say that's the one argument against him, but considering that he is just way too cheap at this course, in terms of course fit, is I think one of the better course fits in this range. He's up there with an Adam Scott, who I also think is a decent course fit. But down here in the 7K range or top end of the 6s, just not what you're looking for in terms of bombers off the tee, right? Kitayama is one of the unicorns from that perspective. So love him there at $7,200 and at only 4.9% ownership. And lastly, we've got ourselves Matt Wallace, who I played a few weeks ago, didn't work out, actually missed the cut last week at Vedanta, which was surprising, especially after shooting 4 under par on day 1. But what I like here is the event history. It's a little bit sneaky. I don't think a lot of people consider this, but he finished tied for 6th a few years ago, which was in a stretch of form that was not favorable for Matt Wallace, who'd been playing much better over the last few months, of course, including the win at Corrales. But what I really like here as well is the fact that he's played well at comp courses. Valspar Championship was in contention just a few months ago when I was there at that event. He's had success at a lot of driver-heavy courses, and over the last 36 rounds, he's paving the way of a really solid ball striker, really consistent player, which is what I like here. From everything from fairway in, he's gaining. You see a slight loser on the greens. He's very much so, kind of like some of the other plays we're getting to here, a pop player, kind of like a Keith Mitchell. He's not afraid to go out there, gain 4 or 5 strokes putting on the greens, and he's not afraid to hemorrhage 2-3 strokes in between in some of his missed cuts. So I'm okay with the fact that he's losing a little bit on the greens. That's kind of on brand for him. Off the tee, though, he's an extremely long player, so the fact that he's losing 0.4 strokes per round, that's also likely due to some of those penalty shots that he runs into. At this course, there are a few holes with water in play, particularly towards the last 3-4 holes, but outside of that, it's a lot of tree-lined fairways where he found so much success at the Valspar. So whether it's a visual thing, whether it's the lack of water that he was able to lean into, I like the fact that he's had success at some of the comps, not just the Valspar Championship, and of course here at Quail Hollow before with the T6 finish. So $7,000. I mean, let's look at the last 12 rounds. I think they're perhaps even more favorable for Matt Wallace. Yeah, you can see gaining in the tee to green categories, losing 0.6 strokes per round putting. Again, kind of on brand for him. Let's see, and on Poetrivolous, he's losing about 1/3 of a stroke per round. So the putter could be the one thing to hold Matt Wallace back, but at this point, we're at the 7K range. We're about to dip into the 6K range here with the pricing. You're not going to get a perfect player. So I like the upside. I like the event history. It's what I'm leaning into here, and especially at just 2.6% projected ownership. Alrighty, that is all I've got for the value plays this week. Before you hopping out of here, smash that like button and also go ahead and comment down below who your top play priced $8,000 and below is on DraftKings, and give me a little reason why. For me, I'm gonna go ahead, take Keith Mitchell, right? He's towards the top end of that range. Love the course history, love how he's been playing of late, and I think the short game, meant to mention this before, it's a lot better than what it was those first 2 trips here. And now that he has that plugged, I think if he gets into contention, a little bit more live to hold on to that, maybe even win this golf tournament. So I'll go with Killer Keith. Go ahead and let me know down below who you guys are thinking for this week. But as per usual, appreciate all the support here on the channel. We'll have fades and sleepers dropping tomorrow morning, covering some of the more overhyped and underhyped plays of the week. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss when that drops. Also going to be doing our live stream. That'll be tomorrow evening. So at 7 p.m. Eastern time, bring all of your questions to that. We'll be touching on the weather, going through some of the chalk, your prop questions, which pretty much everything you need to know for the week. So just making sure that we touch on everything, make sure everyone is prepared for their lineups, their outright bets, and ready to go out there and crush it for the Wells Fargo. But until then, best of luck with those lineups, any outright bets you decide to go with, and let's go out there and crush it for this designated event.